As a horror story narrator, it honestly irks me a bit when someone sends me their encounter with something creepy and boasts about taking a photo of it and never follows through with that photo. But today is a different day. The people in the following story shared their photo evidence with me. Photos that are unsettling and very much up to your interpretation. Enjoy these allegedly true stories with supposedly real photos of disturbing, unexplained entities. Goatman by the Road. A subscriber by the username of Gusekia sent me this story and a series of photos of a creature we have become familiar with on this channel, the Goatman. Or perhaps it's something else. I'll leave it up to you to decide. Here's their story. I work in construction and all over the state of Montana. The location of this was in Wilsall, Montana, on the Horse Creek Road Bridge. It was after our company's 2-week Christmas break, and everybody was heading back. My supervisor James suddenly calls me and tells me I'll be going up with him for a 3-week job, where we'd be refinishing 2 bridge decks. So I head on over to Livingston, Montana, which is a 2-hour trip from Butte. A couple of weeks of work pass by. It was just me and him working the entire job, and every day he would leave early, having me stay to finish what I needed to do. Now, to the northeast of the job site, there is a tree line. It's not exactly a forest, just a scatter of woods. Well, one day we get done putting in the deck of the bridge, bolting and welding it into place, and my supervisor lays out a plan for me to put in gravel with the skid steer. Then he leaves. I spent a couple of hours back-dragging and smoothing out the gravel. It's pretty dark out, and the only source of light I had at that point was the skid steer. I go to the end of the bridge with trees and bushes, and the minute I get over there, I get this sense of something just not being right. This steadily escalated into a feeling of being watched. I spun the skid steer in place all the way around in a circle, but I didn't see anything. But the feeling was ever worsening. It felt like pure evil. Everything about it was unbearable to even be there. I fixed a bump in the road by back-dragging while facing that side just to see if I could see anything that would cause the sensation. But I didn't. Then I parked the skid steer by my truck, quickly hopped in, then drove away, taking one picture to confirm to my boss that I got it done. Then I called it a night. But as I turned around, my tailgate was slammed, hard enough to feel like someone or something with a lot of weight to it had pushed it down. I looked behind me, but I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. I didn't think then. I just drove away as fast as I could, while my tailgate was still down. When I got back into town, I stopped and I closed the tailgate. Thankfully, nothing was missing, so I got back in the truck and called my mother. I told her the whole story, and she gets chills by the end of it. I sent her the picture of the place I was working at, the one I'd taken just before I left, and she pointed out something that I hadn't seen before. And even then, after she pointed it out, I wasn't sure I was seeing it. Then she shows my older brother. He could see it too. The first thing he said is there's something wrong with that picture, and I had chills about it for the rest of the night. The following day, I didn't even bother telling my boss. He's not the type to believe that kind of stuff, so I left it alone. Eventually, I forgot all about it. A couple of weeks later, I'm sitting on another job site on lunch when I decide to pull out my phone and delete some unwanted things to clear up my space. I get to the pictures, and I start picking the ones out that I don't want anymore when I see the picture from that night. Remembering what my mother and brother had said, I took a closer look at it. And then something did catch my eye. From the right corner, just from behind the bushes, is what appears to be a creature that looks similar to a goat but tall. I'd never seen any goats out there that big or tall, taller than the bushes it was standing behind. The fear and chills from that night came back. That thing. It had been staring at me while I took that picture. I posted this photo on Facebook, on a paranormal page, and for the last couple of days I've had non-stop comments about it. Some see the goat creature, some see spirits like a cowboy. About 80% of the people commenting on the post are creeped out. And then there's the 20% that say it's all in my head, that it's just a bunch of trees and bushes. But I know what I felt that night, and now I'm convinced that it wasn't an ordinary night. To prove it to you, I have both day and night pics that show the same spot where that creature had been. The day pic might be angled a bit differently, but in where the left tree is, there are no bushes or anything there that would explain a weird goat figure or creature. Taking a look at the photos that Gusekia posted, I'll try to outline what I see and overlay it. If you see something different, let me know in the comments. To me, whatever's in the night picture that's causing the look of a goat face above the bushes no longer appears to be present in the day picture. Just as Gusekia had stated, I'm not sure what it is, but it matches the description of a goat man that I've heard throughout the country, so it definitely makes me wonder. Gusekia, this picture gives me chills too. Demon House. The following story and photos were shared with me by the username Barracuda. There are 2 disturbing instances of hauntings shown in these photos, as 2 are taken from the outside of the home, and 1 from within. Are these the same spirit, or are a cavalcade of spirits possessing this old home? Let's take a look. Here is Barracuda's story. One of my best friends passed away in 2009 of lung cancer. The house he lived in and died in was haunted. The house itself was built in the 1940s, and no prior owner history was known about it. My friend Jay purchased this house as a fixer-upper in the late 90s or early 2000s, and it needed a fair bit of work. Before his family moved in, which consisted of his wife and 2 daughters, he would pretty much work on it daily in the evenings after work. All was quiet when he'd be there by himself, and nothing out of the ordinary occurred at first. He did, however, take several pictures of the before condition of the house on the inside and the outside. This was in the early days of cameras and cell phones, and the pictures unfortunately were not high resolution. He eventually got the family moved in after about a month of work, and all seemed well at first. One day he called me to tell me that he had been going through the pictures he had taken of the property and had come across a strange anomaly in one of the photos. He sent it to me in an email, although he only lived a couple of minutes away from me. It was an outside shot of the house, and what appeared on it was quite strange. It looked like a solid black figure of some kind was hanging out of one of the upstairs windows. What was even stranger was that this window was definitely closed. I remember thinking, wow, he certainly caught something interesting. Now, back in those days, Yahoo was one of the few big internet search engines, and they had a feature where you could store your digital photos and even add some effects to the photos if you wanted to. I uploaded the photo into Yahoo and began running it through some of the effects filters. When I viewed it through one of these filters, which I think was called Stone, I was shocked. What before looked to be a black figure was now clearly an oversized, grinning skull face on top of a body that was posing for the camera. It had one arm bent with fist on hip, and the other arm bent with its fist over its chest. I made hard copies of these photos so that they would never be lost, and I'll try and include copies with this story. Needless to say, We were both shocked when we saw this. We immediately set out on a quest to find more paranormal evidence and used his instant Polaroid camera to take probably 60 to 100 more photos of the inside and outside of the place. Sadly, the only thing we caught was some wispy white mist in a couple of the photos, but no more solid figures. About a month after they moved, that's when they started to experience paranormal events on a regular basis. They would hear conversations going on when no one was there, footsteps on the stairs at all hours of the night. Objects would disappear and reappear in odd places, and I'm sure many other things that I've since forgotten about. One disturbing occurrence that happened on more than one occasion concerned his 2 young daughters when they would be in their shared bedroom. They claimed a disheveled old man in ragged clothes would watch them from across the street. He mostly looked like a black shadow just outside of the light of the street lamp. After a minute or two, he would suddenly fly over to a branch in the tree near their bedroom window and would watch them from his perch in the tree. The description of this man-thing is important in relation to what happened to me later. Not long after we had taken all the pictures, a crazy event happened to both of us on the same night. Now, I've had probably hundreds of sleep paralysis events happen to me over the years, and malevolent entities were involved in every single one of them. But the one that happened that night was significant. I'd been up very late doing stuff on the early internet, probably goofing off in chat rooms. Are those even still a thing? I was finally too exhausted to stay awake further and went to bed right at 2:30 a.m. I was instantly asleep, but I was awakened almost immediately. I saw a bright flash and I'd heard the sound of a camera shutter. I got the impression of a ratty old man in hobo-type clothes and Freddy Krueger-type hat ducking down into the shadows to my left. I also had the impression of a large animal of some sort on the bed with me. Being exhausted, I was very confused. I lay there for a moment and focused my vision on the only light source in the room, the faint glow of the computer screen in the next room being seen on my bedroom door. A few seconds later, there was a second flash and a shutter sound, and I instantly saw clearly what was on the bed with me. It was a dog whose body was facing away from me, but it had its head turned towards me, with its teeth fully bared. The dog looked almost exactly like the dog statue that Joey and Chandler had in the sitcom Friends. The closest breeds I can compare it to are the Afghan, Borzoi, or Saluki. I'd realized up to this point I was in sleep paralysis, but I fully woke up after this. Of course, the dog and old man were gone, but when I jumped out of bed, I walked through a cold spot in my room. I looked at the time and it was 2:45. Now, when I told Jay all of this the next day, he had some very interesting information to add to the story. He stated that he had also been on the internet very late. His computer desk was only about 5 feet from his front door, and it had been a pretty windy night. He said that he was on the computer and the only one still awake. He kept hearing what sounded like 2 paper towel dowels hitting against each other. Every time he turned around, the sound would stop. He also kept thinking as he listened to the wind, wouldn't it be crazy if Charlie made the front door fly open? Charlie was the nickname they'd given the ghost, although it sounds like there was more than one entity there. Suddenly, his door did fly open, and the doorknob hit the wall. I asked if he knew what time this had happened, and he said 2:45. His entity, demon, whatever you want to call it, it was sick of us trying to photograph it, so it had come to my house to harass me, and then returned from whence it came. Crazy stuff happened at this house over the years, but that was the only time it messed with me as well. Later on, he got a crazy picture of some sort of demon clown head thing sitting on his dresser, of which I also have the picture, and I'll try and send it. I hope you enjoyed the crazy tale, and I swear every bit of it is true. I went ahead and overlaid the stone filter version of the first photo over the original. Keep in mind the only editing I did was resizing and placing the filtered photo to make it align with the original. And now with my terrible tracing skills, I'll outline what I think I'm seeing here. Considering the size and proportions of the entity, it's easy to say that seeing something like this in your home would be pure nightmare fuel. Rupert. Now, this last story and photograph leave much more up to the imagination. The photo was taken in the dark, using a blue filter to make things out a bit better, but it's still difficult to figure out what's being seen. I'll go through the story first, then show you what I can make out, thanks to the help of my fans on Twitter and YouTube. This was submitted by Gage C. It was August 2014. My wife and I are living in a quadplex in Killeen, Texas. She's 9 months pregnant. Initially, when moving into our home, we noticed that on the lease it mentioned not to enter the attic. Inquisitive as human beings are, I insisted that I did. It was just forbidden to enter because I would have access to my neighbor's apartment through the attic. Not a week after entering the attic, our room began to get very cold. A cold room in August in Texas, it's like 100 degrees there in the summer. I can promise you, I was just as confused as you are. We ended up changing our rooms so that we inhabited the spare room. We got 5 sugar gliders and housed them in that initial room in hopes that the room would warm up. September 2013, my first child was born, and all sorts of stuff started going weird there. One morning I did my normal routine. Get up at 5:45, go to PT, come home, change, go to work. I remember leaving home seeing the stroller up against the wall in the living room, wheels to the roof so it didn't roll. I came home that night to the wife in the bedroom with one heck of a story to tell. She approaches me and asks me how the heck the stroller gets tossed across the living room. Flabbergasted, I noticed the stroller, wheels away from the door as if it had been pushed. I didn't believe her one bit. I didn't believe in paranormal stuff back then. As time went on, we noticed changing temperatures. Winter came and the spare room began to get even colder. I caulked up the windows and checked to see if the vent was working. It was blowing hot air, but it dissipated almost immediately. The sugar gliders began to get aggressive, biting us whenever we tried to interact with them. We also had a cat named Charlie. One specific night was a precursor to the second most terrifying night of my life. We laid my son to sleep, but something was bugging him, irritating him to the point that he was red in the face from crying. We attempted everything we knew as young new parents to soothe the poor baby. I left the house to get him a glowworm. I got home and it worked, but the fresh batteries died unusually fast. Charlie came into the room when we shooed him out and worries that he was allergic. As he left, he went into the kitchen as normal. Soon I heard a thunderous bang, like someone stomping or jumping around. The cat screamed and hissed and hauled it right into the room onto the windowsill, back hunched, hair standing straight up and still hissing. I don't think we slept a wink that night. The next night was eerily similar. My son was still irritated, so on my way home I bought batteries. I remember sitting on the couch using my Gerber tool to replace the batteries in the glowworm toy. As I attempted to re-enter the bedroom through a T-shaped hallway, I noticed my wife to my right, towards the trapdoor, facing the animal room. I still remember every feature of her to this day. She was wearing a yellow and gray horizontally striped shirt, blue jeans with long flowing blonde hair. I reached out to her, and my wife screamed. Behind me, like she'd seen a ghost. I jumped back looking at her. Then I looked back to what I thought was my wife, and nothing was there. My wife told me she had seen a slight haze and me trying to touch it. We moved about a month later. It's now 2014. Between the time that I moved to Fort Campbell, Kentucky to when I returned from a deployment in Kandahar, Afghanistan, no significant paranormal activity occurred. What did happen was my wife's personality completely shifted to the point that we got divorced, and I moved back home to Pennsylvania. I should note that our cat Charlie still lives to this day at my mother's house in Three Springs, Pennsylvania. That cat is still petrified of whatever happened to it. He hardly ever leaves the underside of her bed, forever traumatized by whoever or whatever attacked it. Fast forward to October 2015. I'm now living in Oak Grove, Kentucky with my girlfriend and her son. Everything is great at that point, besides that I don't have my boy anymore. Days and months go by, with the memory of the paranormal incident at that quadplex burnt in my memory. I can't exactly pinpoint what day the next set of paranormal incidents happened, but they were, by far, the most frightening next few days of my life. Let me just go ahead and set the scene for you. My son, 3 years old, can't reach the lights in his room. If he gets out of bed, you hear the thump of him hopping out of his bed. We have a theater-style set that we made up with our recliners in front of the TV, with a surround sound system around the living room. We have about 5 ball pythons and 1 7-foot boa constrictor. Now that the scene is set, I'm going to tell you the most frightening, and yes, as real as the hair standing on my neck right now thinking about it, story that I have the privilege to tell people. My girlfriend and I were watching The Conjuring. Just seeing that word makes me cringe. Sometime during the movie, we heard vibrations on the counter. She looks at me and says, "Was that your phone?" "Nah, my phone's in my lap. Was it yours?" We're both obviously stirred up from the creepy movie. "No, my phone's dead and it's right here," she replies. We forget about it. A few more moments later, we feel a breeze between us. Note that the vents in that apartment blew upward, not laterally. And with the physics of airflow, if it would hit us, it would come downward from the ceiling, not horizontally. Startled, we looked at each other, shrugged it off, and kept at it. A few minutes later, she nervously elbows me and says, "Did you see that?" I shook my head no, whispering, "The lights in his room are just flickering," referring to her son's room. At that moment, all the memories of the quadplex came back to me. I told her to elbow me again when she sees it, and I'll video record it. And she does. I start my recorder and face it up the stairs for about 5 seconds. We rewind it and look again to no avail. Just darkness and the light from the TV. The movie ends and we sneak upstairs like we're being hunted. We lie in bed and eventually drift to sleep. The next thing that would happen to me has scarred me for life. This is the reason why I'm the lightest sleeper on Earth and officially scared of steps. At approximately 3 a.m., I awaken to the sound of fingernails tapping a snake tank located in the landing of the stairwell 3 distinct times. I sit straight up in bed, curious and scared of what that was. I then hear slow, methodical steps coming up the stairs. One by one, they continue. My heart may have stopped, I don't know. But all I know is whoever was coming up those stairs was not about to be impeded by me. I was too terrified to move. This thing hit the landing of the stairs and walked into my girlfriend's son's room. It stood there, turned around very slowly, and walked back down the stairs. It got halfway down, turned around, and walked back up just as slowly as it did before. Finally, I get up. Like a hawk after a mouse, I grab my shotgun, which is always loaded, and slam open my door, clearing the landing and stairwell. I check her son's bedroom and find it empty. I race downstairs awaiting to be faced by an intruder but find nothing. I make my way back upstairs and grab her son and lie him in bed with us. I manage to pass out, but I awaken to a lucid dream. I wake up and step out of bed. I notice the walls are made of concrete and the window is barred with steel bars. The door to the landing is steel. I look back to see her and her son sleeping soundly in bed. I open the door to find the landing concrete, but big blue words on it that read "Only Child" and "Boy Child" sorta scribbled in what I recall to look like chalk or marker. I go down the stairs, following the continuation of random words and phrases. I turn the corner expecting to see my living room and kitchen, only to find them gone. Nothing is there but big blue public toilet stalls. Recalling what my grandma had told me in her Catholic studies, I announce, "In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, who are you?" Then, out jumps a tall, lanky, gray, malnourished man. No apparent clothing and no apparent anatomical parts. His face appeared reverse teardrop-shaped, with large, depressed eyes, no apparent nose, and immense jowls. He exclaims loudly and forcefully, but jolly as the bearded man himself, "I am Rupert." I awake in my room, cold sweat and trembling. 6 times I had the exact same dream, and the details will never leave my mind. The next morning, I head out to work. Excited and still shaken up, I show my coworkers the video, but they're not impressed. I give it to one of my nerd friends, who does his work. Frighteningly, he uncovers something that has changed this from a story to enchant and scare people, to a non-fictional nightmarish encounter with a poltergeist. I'll upload this image for you to see. Every time I show someone, they find an additional image. This image is of my stairwell going up into the 2nd floor. Unfortunately, I accidentally deleted the video, but I'm still trying to learn how to use the cloud to recover it. The image is a still frame capture of a man, eerily exactly as it was in my dream, peering creeperishly around the corner. Eyes wide, mouth gaping, 4 fingers can be identified. The picture is in a blue filter, which helps identify shadows in dark and shadowy environments. The video captured it sitting on the stairs, which appears as a white blob, spins and sprints up the stairs within 3 to 5 frames, then peeks his head out at the top of the stairs and drops to the middle, then runs back up the stairs. If there's any way I can post that here, let me know. I'd love to share that. But buckle up, it's not over yet. I return home from work to a family hoarding themselves in the living room with bedding and all the necessities to camp there forever. We make our day enjoyable and ignore the quite unignorable footsteps upstairs. Yeah, your boy Rupert was quite active. I remember leaving late in the day to go to a pet store just to get away from the house. I'm not one to leave doors open, blinds up, and lights on, just keep note of that. We leave and have a decent time until sleep began to call my name. As we pull into the driveway, my girlfriend at the time screams and grabs the steering wheel, gasping, saying, "Look, in our bedroom." I remember quite vividly seeing our bedroom door opened, light in the hallway on, blind open, and a tall, black, shadowy man pacing in the hallway. I don't know what to do at this time. Daddy's gotta sleep, so we went into the house. Once I shut off the lights in the car, the shadow stopped in the landing, turned, and walked into her son's room. I'm telling you, if you think you know how it is to be terrified of your own home, you aren't close to feeling how I felt that night. The next day was just as the last, except when we left for the pet store, we left the blinds open, the door open, and the lights on. We backed out of the lot and stopped at the street to see what would happen. Surely enough, we noticed a slight black mist at the roof and someone walk out, starting to pace. We spent our time at the pet store, and eventually came home to camp on the couch again. Time passed. We broke up due to another weird change in personality, and we went our own ways. The date is June 2019. I'm remarried to my lovely wife and now a stepdad to 2 baby girls. At this time, we had my son over and the girls were at their dad's. I can't really remember clearly enough what events happened prior to my most recent visit with Rupert to confidently spell out the situation in order to keep my credibility, but this is what happened. I remember putting my boy to bed, and me and the wife are getting ready ourselves. All of a sudden, we hear footsteps coming up the stairs, again slowly shuffling methodically up the stairs. In the back of my head, and then jokingly to my wife, I say, "Here comes Rupert." I call out to my son, telling him to get back to bed. There's no response as the steps get to the landing. I call out again, asking if it's my son. The footsteps get closer. Rupert gets to the door. I call my son's name once more, nervously and quiet. I'm quite scared then, to be honest. The door cracks open, I jump, and my wife screams. We check on my son, who's sound asleep in his bed. While this is going on, I remember knocking coming from my son's room. His appearance when we checked on him was unsettling. He was kind of contorted to an unnaturally inhuman position. Honestly, I didn't remember that part until I read this to my wife. Still the same lady in the previous events who mentioned the smacking on the walls and really creepy sleeping position during the time Rupert entered our room. Finally, we're at the end, and I really hope that my story can end up reaching someone who can help me either identify what's going on or to inspire those wanting to explain their terrifying ordeals with us. For now, I'll upload that picture to enhance the reality of my story and to bring an image to your eyes of what I experienced with the paranormal world. Thank you. Here is the image presented by Gage. As you can see, it's extremely difficult to even make out the angle or perspective of the photo. So I reached out to my fans on Twitter and YouTube to see if I could get some help as to identifying what Gage saw in this photo. A user on Twitter by the handle @KonoganeKume then posted this edit of the picture in reply. It was only then that I realized that the perspective was the side of the stairs at a bit of an odd angle. To help you better understand, I made an edit of the photo. Here you can clearly see a banister above the stairs, meaning the white columns are the balusters. So what this Twitter user highlighted is something peeking out from behind the wall at the top of the staircase, while the person taking the photo is at the bottom floor, facing the staircase at the side of it. Then again, I can personally find a number of different faces in this photo, thanks to pareidolia, which is the scientific term for the brain's ability to find faces and patterns where there may not even be one. I'll leave it up to you to decide what you see here or what you don't. So, did you enjoy these stories? Which photo and story do you find the most believable? Which picture gave you the biggest chills? Until next time, stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.